All right, we are here and hopefully everything will now be working. So, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully, people start streaming in. Now I've got a beer and I am all ready to go. So, yeah, there were a few people that commented that it's not going to be in the official Sunday, November 12th stream. That you'd ask some questions or made some remarks, and I whatever. I talked about them, but that's all gone. So it's gone into the void forever. It's never going to be here. All right. So today I didn't really have. Oh, I didn't close the door. 1 second. All right. So I didn't really have a topic in mind today. So I am just going to be talking about whatever I feel like, and part of that is to really just get out of the habit of just meta ethics all the time. There's going to be some meta ethics though, because I feel like talking about it. Oh, so someone asked, it's a Guinness, and I added a shot to it. So it's not just beer, it's spiked beer. So yeah, so I like to add stuff to my Guinness to flavor it up. Alrighty. So yeah, so I have a video coming out tomorrow. And what I was saying is that if you already know the topic, and I might talk about related stuff today, then cool. If not, it's going to be one of the first videos in an effort to expand the range of the channel. I'm not dropping the meta ethics moral realism stuff. I'm moving in to new territory. So let me talk a little bit about what I think kind of happened. So I started at Cornell in 2015. So it was a long time ago. And yeah, whatever. Let's do it. Let's talk about basically what happened with my program and like how I ended up where I'm at. But first, let me say hi to everybody, because I like to do that while I can, while we don't have 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people on the stream, all with just the comments flying by, and I need 10 moderators and people are screaming in the chat at each other. I can actually talk to you. So I'm going to do that. So let's do it. Oh, right. We got Jordan. What's up, Lance? Hey. And also, now I feel bad for all the people that were here initially, and they're not in the video. So come back. Alrighty. We got Patrick saying, hey, besties. What's up, Patrick? We got Moxie C saying, hi, Lance. Hello. We got Meredith saying, hello, everybody. And, or actually, Meredith said, hello, everyone. My brain edits what people say. And then we got Chase says, hi. So, hey, everybody. If you know what, I could just try to if you made a comment earlier and you wanted me to do the same thing as before, I could do my best to try to replicate it. So you could try. Hey, Andre says, still here. Yeah, I got it resolved. So if you don't already know, I use StreamYard, and the person in StreamYard was able to help me out. So thank you very much to them. So I got it resolved, and they were like super quick with getting things fixed up. So it's me just not knowing how to use technology properly. All right, so for those of you who are new or have been with me for a while. So I started this channel in January or February or something. I think in January, right? Yeah, whatever. Like at the start of the year. So it hasn't quite been a full year where I've had the channel. Before that, I had started a blog in August. So I had the blog about 4 or 5 months beforehand. So here's basically how I got started with everything. It was, I think, a couple years ago now. I saw a couple people, James Fodor and Nathan Orman from Digital Gnosis, and they do a lot of videos together that I really like, which is basically going after they do like counter apologetics, and they review apologetics videos and that sort of stuff and critique it. And I like what they do. So they came on, and I don't even know where they stand on these issues now, but they were defending moral realism on another channel. And I got really pumped up by that. And then I basically started appearing on other people's channels for, I don't know, like a year. It was a while. I was in like 20, 30 videos. It's all over the place. And my views kind of started being, I don't know, refined and developing and changing a bit over that time. I haven't had any radical changes in my views, but basically I'm a moral anti-realist, but I also, one of the things that animates me about the topic is how much moral anti-realists I think are maligned, and how I basically, look, whether you're a realist or an anti-realist, I think basically this: the arguments for moral realism, all of them are not good arguments. Arguments for anti-realism, I also don't think are particularly good. I think that the way one lands on one or the other of these positions is largely due to background considerations. But what I've found is that a lot of people have quite nasty things to say about anti-realists and about anti-realism, about morality. And a lot of it seems to be motivated by this perspective that anti-realism has all these awful implications. Now, when you examine these implications, a lot of times it's really silly stuff because it's like, well, if you're an anti-realist, you can't say this sentence given a particular meaning of what that sentence would mean. So what? So I can't say a sentence with a particular set of presuppositions implicit in the meaning of the sentence. Okay. I mean, that it's just this, like, you can't say that anything is truly wrong, something like that. Well, I mean, one, yes, you can. But if by truly wrong they mean stands independently wrong, then sure, okay, then I can't say that consistently with anti-realism. And, well, then you're not saying it's truly wrong to torture babies or whatever. Okay, but I'm against baby torture. I'm just as opposed to it as you are. I find it just as horrible as you do. I act all the same ways towards it as you. I just don't think that its wrongness has this like weird metaphysical implications, and that there's these facts out there that somehow bind us or have authority over us. Okay, and I also consider all of that completely practically irrelevant in every possible respect, and I act exactly like a realist would. And yet somehow this is like horrible, evil, no good, and very bad and awful. It's, to me, it's as ridiculous as someone saying you cannot genuinely enjoy food if you don't think that the tastiness of the food is an intrinsic property of the food. If you don't think it's an intrinsic property of the food, you're not really enjoying the food. And it's like, okay, you're having all the same psychological states. Your phenomenology is the same. Your culinary decisions are the same. You know, someone serves you terrible food that's burnt. You're like, oh, it's bad. And then you eat the good food and you're like, this is great. But you don't think it's intrinsically great. Then somehow that diminishes the experience of the food, or you can't really be a chef, or you can't be a genuine food critic. None of that follows. That's all profoundly silly. So I think that realism, it's not just that it's wrong. I just think it's so profoundly superfluous. I don't understand what the appeal even is. So anyway, so that's my whole thing. So I got started on all that the past couple of years, but I think for the past year, probably 90% of my videos are on metaethics and moral realism. I've done meta philosophy stuff. I've done a few other topics. I talked to Josh Noah. I talked to Kyle Thompson. I talked to a few other people, David Sakris, about like the moral domain. So I've done other topics. I've talked about other stuff. I talked about consciousness a few times. Actually, my first stream was on free will. So I have talked about a few other topics, but here's basically, oh, I got more people. So let's say hi to everybody and then I'll continue. Are we getting the Lance Independent origin story today? Which radioactive philosopher bit you to give you your superpowers? Yeah, so if I could choose a radioactive philosopher to bite me to give me superpowers, it'd probably be Nietzsche, because that would be cool. I would get a much better mustache than this one. This one kind of sucks. Like, come on. It's not as majestic, right? So yeah, probably Nietzsche. But, you know, as far as ancient philosophers go, I always was a fan of Epicurus ever since I had a professor basically say, you're going to write about Epicurus. Epicurus was like way cooler than he's given credit for compared to a lot of other philosophers. Like, to hell with Plato and Aristotle. Epicurus is the shit. I like Epicurus. Yeah, and then other philosophers with cool radioactive powers that they would give you. Wittgenstein. What am I talking about? Okay, no, I override that. Wittgenstein is number one. Nietzsche's number two. Who's number three? So probably William James or F.C.S. Schiller. So probably one of those two. So a lot of people don't know who Schiller is. I have a friend that's kind of a Schiller scholar. Kind of. They are a Schiller scholar. So I really need to sit down, read their work, read more Schiller. Mostly so far what I've gotten is excerpts, or I've like started randomly picking up in the middle of some Schiller text and reading it. I'm like, this is awesome. So I love Schiller. Schiller was an old school classical pragmatist. That was a contemporary of William James and was known for having kind of like a caustic attitude towards the way that he talked about other people's work, and was very, very critical and bombastic, but in a way I find super entertaining. So I really like Schiller. So one of them. Yeah, this same friend, I think that they asked me, how did you end up doing the kind of work that you do, like experimental philosophy, metaethics, psychology, philosophy, interdisciplinary, all that stuff. And I think I said something like this. I said, you know, I could tell you some sort of narrative, some sort of story about how I came to have the interests that I have. But, you know, I have no clue. I don't know exactly why I got into what I got into. If I think back on it, I can kind of construct a story that sounds plausible, but it's going to be a bunch of confabulated bullshit. You know, we tell a lot of stories about ourselves, but if you know much about the psychological research on confabulation and memory, you may know, I'm not one of those people that's going to say memory is completely unreliable and no one remembers any. That's nonsense. People remember things. Memory is pretty damn useful. But there is a significant reconstructive element of it. And it's the same thing that you would expect to happen with a story when one person tells it to another person who tells it to another person, that it gets degraded and distorted and modified over time. It's the same thing with our memories. When we sort of check our memory over time, it degrades, and different memories will degrade presumably to varying degrees in varying ways. There's a difference between, I remember like the specific day that I got my diploma or I got married or whatever, right? Like I can remember what day it was on. So there's certain types of information that you can recall that's just specific information. But there's aspects of episodic memory, like the experiential aspects, that you might misremember, like exactly where a person was positioned or what color someone's hat was or whatever. And that kind of stuff can get slightly modified or changed over time. You can end up having, your memories can get distorted in various sorts of ways. But the other thing is that we construct a lot of stories about ourselves, and we don't just have to make inferences about other people. We make inferences about ourselves, about our own motivations. We often don't know, and we make inferences about what we did in the past, and aspects of what we did are inferred or theorized or reconstructed in ways that I don't fully trust. And so I don't fully trust telling a story about, everything that just ends up being too neat and too tidy. The truth is, I don't know exactly how I got into what I got into. I can tell you some of the stuff that is part of that narrative, but take it all with a grain of salt, because I take it with a big spoonful of salt. Okay, so I remember it was back around 2012 or so. I read this exchange, and the titles of the papers are absolutely hilarious. So you have these two philosophers, Stephen Finlay and Richard Joyce. And let me adjust this downward a little bit. Okay. So Stephen Finlay and Richard Joyce had this back and forth. Richard Joyce is an error theorist, and Stephen Finlay, I'm not 100% sure exactly what Finlay's account is, but it looks like some type of like speaker relativism or something like that. So as far as I could tell, they're both some kind of anti-realist. So I think it was Finlay wrote a paper that I think is called let me just double check just to be absolutely sure. I'm 97% sure, but I don't trust my own memory, which I was just saying. Let's see. Yeah, I got it. Cool. Okay, so it's a paper called The Error in the Error Theory, which is a cool title, right? The Error in the Error Theory. It's clever. So Joyce responds with a paper titled, in fact, I'll put the citations in here so people can look them up. Someone could throw them into the comments later. That's the first reference. So what was Joyce's response to that? The error in the error theory, in quotes. I thought that was awesome. And then there was a response called, I think, Errors Upon Errors from Finlay. Errors Upon Errors. Yeah, Errors Upon Errors, a reply to Joyce from Finlay. And then Joyce had a response that I think was never published, I think called Enough with the Errors. Let's see. Enough with the Errors, a final reply to Finlay, which presumably is the final reply to Finlay. So that exchange was a blast for me. So I read that exchange and I really, really enjoyed that. And you should check that out, because what you're seeing is two anti-realists, or at least as far as I think Finlay's an anti-realist. Look, again, not a perfect memory. And I have kind of Swiss cheese memory. I forget a lot of stuff. Like that has to be really specific stuff, and then I'll remember it really, really well. And then everything else I'll forget. And it's ridiculous. Like I'll forget that I turned the stove on 5 seconds ago. I walk in rooms and forget why I went into the room. So it's pretty bad. Anyway, so that exchange was fascinating to me because when I read it, I see these two anti-realists talking about what people mean when they make moral claims. And I remember one of them, I forget if it was Joyce or Finlay, said something like, what people mean is not going to turn on what they would say when asked. And I remember kind of scratching my head going, well, why wouldn't it turn on what they would say when asked? And, there's one good answer is, well, people don't have good introspective access to the sort of underlying structure of language and the implicit features of what they mean when they say things. There's going to be these sort of implicit presuppositions, and people don't necessarily have great introspective access to all of that. So for instance, if you take a native English speaker and you give them a big list of English sentences and you make half of them like perfectly grammatical sentences and half of them are just weird in various ways and they're not grammatical, and you ask them like rate the sentences, which are grammatical or which are not. But I haven't seen a specific study on this, but my understanding is that people do quite good at that. Like they're good at spotting whether a English sentence is grammatical or not. But here's the kicker. If you then say, well, what grammatical rule does it violate? What's the rule? Or explain. People are not so great at that unless they have formal training in like English and that sort of thing. Which, you know, for me, like, yeah, I had like whatever I had in grade school. I don't remember. So, you know, it's an interesting thing. My wife is from Brazil, and when she learned English, she learned it like much more formally in a much more structured way. And so she can actually tell me more about the structure of the English language than like I explicitly know. For me, it's intuitive, and for her, it's more structured. And she'll be like, oh, but that violates this, or that's inconsistent with that. So she actually can do this, and I can't. And I grew up speaking the language and she didn't. So it's kind of cool the way that works out. So just, you know, the same thing could be happening is that when people are making moral claims, they're not really consciously aware of the underlying philosophical presuppositions that may be implicit in what they're committed to or what they mean. Now, I have issues with that, but it's not a fantastically unreasonable notion to begin with. Anyway, so they're having this dispute, right? And again, I encourage you to check out the papers. You'll be able to find them from the references I put in the chat. So they have this dispute. And I remember thinking, why not both? Why couldn't it be that sometimes people are committed to? So just to give a little background, both of these accounts, error theory, and let's just say, I'm not 100% sure what Finley's account is, some type of relativism. Let's just go with error theory and relativism. So these are, and this is would be some type of anti-realist conception of relativism where the moral claims are indexed to stance-dependent facts. That's all a bunch of technical language. If you don't know what it is, don't worry about it too much. Okay, so the error theorist is going to say, hey, when people say stuff, like when they make moral claims, when they say stuff about morality, and they say stuff like murder is wrong, or, you know, you shouldn't do that, or that's a great thing to do, or that's a very brave person, you know, all these sorts of moral claims someone might make, those people on the error theoretic view are implicitly committed to an attempt, they're sort of attempting to describe an objective or a stance-independent moral reality. Those claims mean, the semantics of those claims when unpacked, means something like murder is wrong, means something like murder, you shouldn't murder because it violates the objective moral facts, like whereby murdering is wrong or whatever. If you don't like murder because like that seems to have normatively that it's wrong built into it, then lying or stealing or killing people or torturing someone for fun, that when you say torturing someone for fun is wrong, that is true in some sort of stance independent way. So that's what people are trying to do on the error theoretic view when they make moral claims. Now, so error theorists are cognitivists. They agree moral claims are propositional. They're attempting to make claims that can be evaluated as true or false. And they're stance independent or objective. They're describing an objective reality out there. They're not referencing our subjective preferences or the standards of our culture or whatever. So it's a cognitivist view, and then it has stance independence. Now, here's where error theory. So far, they sound like moral realists. But then they say, okay, so the realists are right about the semantics of ordinary moral discourse, but there is no objective moral reality. So when people make those claims, all of those claims are actually false. Now, that might sound weird, right? How can you say all the claims are false? Like, wouldn't you just say people aren't in the business of doing that at all? It's a little weird to say all these moral claims are false rather than saying, hey, I have this alternative view where it's not like everyone's going around saying false things. But that's the account. The account would be a bit like if people, here would be one example. Imagine if people's moral claims presuppose the existence of God, and then it turns out God doesn't exist, but people don't know that. So then when people say murder is wrong or stealing is wrong could, in principle, mean something like stealing violates God's commandments. Well, if God doesn't exist, that's actually false because it doesn't violate God's commandments because God doesn't have any commandments because God doesn't exist. And so you could see how a whole cluster of statements could systematically be wrong if they all presupposed something that turns out to not be true. That's what the error theorist is saying. So then the relativist is saying, no. Actually, the moral claims. Oh, well, this is part of the. So someone asked, is this part of the origin story? Yeah, it is part of the origin story. So are we going to hear it? This is part of it. I get into the philosophy that prompted me to get to where I'm going. So the relativist basically, when people make moral claims, they're saying it's true relative to my standards, it's true relative to the standards of my culture, or something like that. So that's the dispute. So notice with both of these accounts that they're accounts of, in part, they're not just about the metaphysics of moral claims. they're accounts of what people mean when they make moral claims. And my reaction to this back and forth is that it looked like Joyce was saying everybody is systematically committed to trying to describe these stance-independent moral facts, and they're all wrong. So error theory. And then Finlay, no, nobody is committed to that. Actually, they're making claims that can be understood as true or false in a relative sense. So they're still not stance-independently true, but they're also not false. So they're true relative to people's values. So you have these two accounts. My reaction was, why couldn't it be some people mean one, what some people mean the other? So I ended up writing this paper. I don't remember which class it was for, but the paper, I'm trying to remember exactly what I called it. I think I called it the folk metaethical diversity hypothesis. I think it was the metaethical diversity hypothesis is I think what I called it. So I wrote this whole paper, and then I came up with, I was like, hey, so it could be that some people always speak as if morality is objective or stance independent, and some people always speak like morality is relative. And then you would have to have a different account for what those people are wrong about. So basically, I was thinking, hey, maybe there's no rigid semantics between different speakers. Sometimes some people speak like realists, some people speak like relativists. And then I thought, okay, well, what if the same person sometimes speaks like a relativist and sometimes speaks like a realist in different contexts, in different situations? So I came up with interpersonal and intrapersonal diversity in what people meant. And so I write up this paper. I'm like ready to submit it for my class. I'm like very happy with my paper. Then I come across this paper. And this is how I think things got started. Again, take it with a grain of salt. Here is the paper. I probably mentioned this paper in like 50 streams. Check it out. So do check this paper out, because this paper would be the most influential paper. Indeterminacy and variability in metaethics. So I had this whole paper, the metaethical diversity hypothesis with interpersonal and intrapersonal intrapersonal. I don't remember if I used variation or diversity. I probably used diversity to fit with the diversity theme, like that different people mean different things. So then I encounter this paper that argues for, hey, there's metaethical, and it has the metaethical variability thesis instead of the metaethical diversity hypothesis. And then it has between persons and within persons variability. It was the same damn thing. It was the same thing, but then it had all these cool stuff, this other extra cool stuff. It had this historical angle on it that Gil takes in the paper. It has this indeterminacy in it, and it was way more robust and interesting and cool than what I wrote. So then I was like, oh crap, someone already had this idea, which is always an odd situation to be in. On the one hand, it's nice to find, hey, a professional philosopher had the same idea you did, or a very similar one. On the other, it's a little bit of a bummer to not be the first person. But, and it was a recent paper. It come out like, 3 years before I wrote my paper. So, yeah, I found that paper. I got all excited. I readjusted my paper to cite Gil and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to defend what Gil says in this paper. At the time, I was really interested in variability. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this, but in fact, let's get way more origin-y. Okay, so when I was like 14 or 15, I had a lot of behavioral issues. I was struggling a lot in school, not with the coursework, but with social difficulties. I'll have to get into another time exactly why I think that might have occurred, because that is going too far back into my life. And it's not that I'm worried about it being personal. It's that it's like a long, whole drawn out process. But basically things were going well. I ended up dropping out of high school, and I spent about a year. All I did was just play video games and sit at home, and I was really depressed, and I didn't do a whole lot of stuff. This is really shifting gears from Finlay and Joyce. Too bad. Deal with it. That's how I am. I'm not going to apologize for it anymore. You're going to have to deal with that. I'm going to jump topics, and that's what. And so, okay, it's like a flashback, all right? And then we're going back, and then we'll get back up to the Finlay and Joyce scenario in 2012. Okay, so I was like 15. I dropped out of school, and I didn't do anything for like a year. And then I got so into video games that took over my life. I ended up quitting video games, started to clear my head, and I was like, all right, I got to do something with my life. So I got my GED, and I started college at 16. I actually remember the first course I took was this class at night. I didn't have a driver's license. My parents would drive me to my college class and leave me at this at this first class. It was summer. I was like nervous about school. So I took one course, and it was anthropology. It was like intro to anthropology. This course was awesome. I loved it. So when I started, and I don't know if I've talked about this much on this channel before. At the time, I had also been a Christian, and I used to go to Sunday school. I didn't like church as much. I go to Sunday school because I wanted to do like Bible study stuff and argue about like theology and stuff. Now, I should say, I never really got into, after that, philosophy of religion, and I never dug deep. So you have other people and channels like Danny from Phil Talk, who knows way more about philosophy of religion. And of course, Joe from Majesty of Reason that knows like infinitely, vastly more than me. I don't know a damn thing compared to them. But at the time, I was really into arguing and discussing it. So you have high school dropout, depressed, starting college, getting a GED, GED and then college. And then also the whole Christian thing. And then while I was a Christian, I started having this view that like I should read other religious texts. So I picked up like Buddhist texts and Hindu texts and like started reading what atheists had to say. And so I started having a sort of crisis of faith, and I started losing my commitment to Christianity. I was still a theist, but I wasn't a Christian anymore. Some kind of somewhere in between in this strange purgatory or limbo period of I had some kind of religious belief, but I wasn't sure what it was. It took about a year or two for me to finally just be like, okay, I'm an atheist. So I started college at 16, and then it was sometime within those 2 or 3 years, a lot of things started to happen. Now, another thing, in addition to being a Christian and then some kind of strange theist at the time, I was really into basically all things like occult, and like I was into cryptozoology. I thought crystal skulls were real. I thought aliens were abducting people. I thought there was all these secret conspiracies and like Area 51. And if it was like the Von Daniken and stuff, like Charity of the Gods, like aliens built the pyramids, like all the silly, stupid, and ignorant, stupid things. Like if it was ridiculous, I was into that stuff at the time. And so something really strange happened. So I took some astronomy courses, and I ran into a person that was into numerology, and they told me that what did they say it was? A psychic investigator. Yeah, they said a psychic investigator was coming to the campus to give a talk. So of all people, especially because it was like I thought they meant that a person that used psychic powers to investigate things was coming to the campus to like talk about how they use their psychic powers. So I was all excited about this, and I go, and no. This was not a person that uses psychic powers to investigate things. It was a person that investigates psychics to show that, yeah, that person's a quack. They're not a real psychic or whatever. It was James Randi. So if you don't know who James Randi was a magician and did a lot of work debunking faith healers and pseudoscience and homeopathy and a whole bunch of like basically pseudoscience and alien abduction stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it was like just a sort of general like debunking extravaganza presentation. I don't remember having a specific focus, but I remember that I just sat in the audience and I felt the world drop out from under me. I was like, oh shit, everything he said was convincing. I was like, holy shit, I have been living in a box and I believe a bunch of bullshit. So I started going to I think it was like randy.org, and I started going to the website and reading it, and it was like debunking stuff every week or month or whatever. And I would read it and I'd cringe and go, no, so all my Christian beliefs were taking a beating. My belief in all the superstition and nonsense and pseudoscience was taking a beating. And I do, and this is again part of the like, is the narrative accurate or am I confabulating it because it sounds like it makes sense? I think roughly I had this idea of if I could be duped that easily into believing all this kinds of nonsense, like the Bible code and crap like that, and I don't think I'm stupid. So I don't really think people that have different beliefs or believe in like, it's not about, basically people often have bad epistemic practices, or they haven't had the right conversations, or just circumstances can lead people to having weird and superstitious and implausible and ridiculous and goofy beliefs. And I wanted to know how did that happen to me? And I started studying philosophy, but then within a year or two, someone said, hey, you should take this course over in the psychology department. I took a course in the psychology department. I ended up loving that course and taking so many courses. I basically some advisor or administrator at some point was like, you could take like a couple stats courses and a bio course and you get a psych degree. So I ended up kind of getting a psychology degree as an afterthought. So I actually have 2 bachelor's degrees because I, as far as I could tell, I think what happened is I had so many credits, I could just apply it to 2 separate. So it's not one diploma that says philosophy and psychology. I have 2 diplomas, which is really cool when I went to my graduation because I had like 2 tassels and like 2 different things and 2 different diplomas. So I had like 2 bachelor's degrees at the same time. So I did philosophy and psychology. So, I had gone through, so I should say, when I got the GED, I didn't think I had a shot at getting into any decent colleges. I ended up, fancy, high, whatever colleges. I started out working on an associate's degree at a community college. It's since become like not a community college anymore. And then I ended up going to Florida Atlantic University. It was relatively nearby. I worked while I went to college. At the time, the tuition there wasn't extraordinary. So I got grants. My parents helped me out, and then I paid part of it by working. So I ended up finishing my bachelor's degrees, both of them, with no college debt. Like I actually just paid, which is, and of course I had support. So that was helpful and nice. And thank you to my mom and dad for helping me out. But it took a while because I was like working and then I didn't always take a full course load and, all that stuff. So when I finished, somewhere between those 2 times. So yeah, so I started getting out of the superstition stuff and the pseudoscience and the Christianity. And by the time I was around 19 or so, I became an atheist and I got really into like debunking stuff, and that started incorporating its way into the philosophy and psychology. I had a group of friends who would meet up every week and talk about this stuff. And I think I got more out of those conversations than I did out of my philosophy and psychology classes, which isn't to say that I didn't get something out of those classes, but this was like week after week. We would meet at 5 or 6 p.m. on a Saturday. We would be up until 2 a.m. just talking philosophy and psychology and science and the world and life and everything, just week after week after week for years. And that in-person, constant, iterative interaction with people, some of them were smarter than me or more knowledgeable than me in certain areas and topics, that just radically changed my perspective and my way of thinking about everything. And it had a huge influence on me, that core group of friends. And, there's been, since then, we've scattered all over the place. So it's kind of sad because since then, I've never really formed a friend group like that where we had weekly meetings. And it's, ever since I moved away to go to grad school, I felt very disconnected. So actually, yeah, there's more stories to say more stories to tell about all the stuff that happened between the sort of leaving Christianity and becoming like more like skeptical, like empiricist, that sort of thing. That happened around the time I was 19. And it wasn't until I was like, I don't know, 25 or 26. See, it took a long time. So I applied to Tufts University, which is like this like highly respected terminal master's program in philosophy. So terminal master's, like they just have a master's program. There's no PhD there. And part of the reasoning I had was I did philosophy and psychology. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do philosophy or psychology for graduate school. And I wasn't coming from this like super highly rated university. Like I did well there and I liked the university and I had good professors there, but it wasn't like I was coming from Yale or Princeton. So I'm applying to this top program, like at Tufts, it's a fancy school. From my perspective, at least, I don't know what people think of it. So I applied there and I didn't think I had a chance. And I remember actually I had the letter from Tufts and I thought it was going to be a rejection letter. You know what? This is again, I don't know. What did I think? I think I was hopeful. So I remember bringing it to work and opening it at work and getting that acceptance letter. And that is when things changed. So I left Florida. I went up to Boston and started at Tufts. Another part of the rationale for being in the Boston area, and this is incidental because I wanted to go to Tufts anyway, is that there's like a million colleges around there and there's certainly stuff you could do. I did end up as a research assistant in the Boston College Morality Lab. And I ended up doing like data collection and getting some lab experience there. And so I got to have the psychology aspect and the philosophy aspect at the same time. It was awesome. So I moved up to Boston, and around that time is when I started reading this Finley and Joyce stuff. So that gets us caught up to Finley and Joyce. And then my first semester at Tufts, where I encountered this Gill paper, this paper by Michael Gill on indeterminacy and variability in metaethics. And so basically what that paper argues, so now we're caught up. We're caught up to 2012. So that paper basically says, hey, there's all these disputes throughout the 20th century in metaethics and descriptive metaethics, trying to figure out what people mean when they make moral claims. And you got the cognitivists and the non-cognitivists, the relativists and the non-relativists, like objectivists and stuff. And you have all these competing disputes. And what they tend to do is they'll focus on this one feature of discourse. And they'll say, look at this feature of discourse. It really looks like non-cognitivism does a good job of accounting for this. And so there's this other discourse. Yeah, sure. It's inconsistent, but we can explain that or explain it away. Like you can account for it. But then you flip over to the cognitivists and like, yeah, but look at this other stuff about, that really looks cognitivist. People make arguments, they deliberate. That looks cognitivist. So sure, there's this stuff that looks non-cognitivist, but I can explain that. I can explain it away. I can handle it. And so you have these accounts that basically pick the stuff that prototypically fits with their account, and then they try to encompass or throw everything else out. And all the views do this to different pockets of discourse. So they basically choose different starting points and then try to pull everything towards their view. And what Gill did is said, okay, no one seems convinced by any of these arguments. It's gone on for a century, a century, whatever. I don't know. I'm not quoting Gill. It's gone on for a while. We haven't resolved it. We're in the 21st century. Here's one possibility. The reasons why cognitivism is so compelling in some cases and non-cognitivism is so compelling in other cases is that they both accurately captured certain aspects of ordinary moral discourse. Sometimes people do use moral claims to express propositions. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people are trying to describe an objective reality. Sometimes they're not. So that there's no specific single uniform and determinate semantic account of everyday moral claims. They just mean different things, possibly in different contexts or in different social situations or whatever. Or it could be that some people are consistently using language one way and some people consistently use it another way. It could be a combination of the two. So one person could be a relativist 80% of the time and a realist 20% of the time. Another person is a realist 90% of the time and a relativist 5% of the time and a non-cognitivist 5% of the time. And so you could get both variations sort of overlapping and intermingling with one another. Now, Gill also talked about another possibility, because notice it's indeterminacy and variability. Indeterminacy could be, yeah, there's just no specific account that people are committed to or making use of at all when they make these claims. Now, the analogy that Gill uses is mathematical Platonism versus anti-Platonism. So just think of a person going, hey, what's 2 + 3? And someone's like, 5? Now, you're doing math in a math class, right, in grade school. But do you presuppose some sort of substantive account of like the metaphysics of numbers? No. You're not committed to there is such a thing or there isn't such a thing. You don't take a position at all. It's just not the purpose of everyday mathematical discourse to make claims about the metaphysics of mathematics. And so it's indeterminate with respect to the Platonism versus anti-Platonism dispute about mathematics, everyday mathematical claims. And Gill says, maybe the same for morality. Maybe it's not really in the business of making claims where those disputes just don't animate what people are doing when they make moral claims. And then you get an indeterminacy. Now, at the time, I just wrote my paper about diversity or variation. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the empirical literature, everybody started using the term pluralism. So that's what most people use now. It all means the same thing. Diversity, variability, pluralism. In this context, the terms are interchangeable. They mean the same thing. Anyway, I focused on the variability at the time. And I got really into doing empirical research because I was really enchanted with this idea that not everybody means the same thing. We have different philosophical presuppositions behind, when you speak, you're a realist. When I speak, I'm an anti-realist. And that's okay. Different people have different presuppositions. And there isn't like a correct semantic account. That is the presumption that I was operating with. And I started trying to do empirical work. At the time, I was thinking about empirical work and theorizing. It wasn't until I got to Cornell a few years later, about 3 years later, that I started collecting data. And I'm going to have to take a break there because I said a lot. So let me check the chat and then we'll pick up with where things went from there. Cool. All right, let's see what people say. Grab a drink while I'm doing this. All right, so this was back from a while ago. The Search for Meaning. Hey, thanks again for having me on your channel. So this is the Search for Meaning. It's a new channel. I don't know if you have new videos on there, but go check out the channel and subscribe to it. We're gonna help out new channels too. Cool. All right, we got Jack Berry. I remember first seeing your channel because you always dropped a tome in the comments on Metaethics videos. I still do that, and too bad for people that don't like it. I'm gonna everywhere I go. So basically, what I do, I can tell you what I do. It's not complicated. I go into YouTube I search moral realism. I search like for the latest videos, and then I check them. I see if the video has content worth commenting on. I listen to the video, find something to comment on, and just get in there and comment. And yeah, I write long comments. That just happens. Moxie C says that. I don't know what that's about. Goblin Lord says, hey, so welcome. Jerome says Epicurus is awesome. Yeah, Epicurus is awesome. Patrick says Wittgenstein can poke me any day. I don't know what that means. Meredith Oleander says, what do you think of this? Moral realism. If they're objective moral facts and we somehow know these facts, then the realist is committed to weird non-physical objects with physical effects. Yeah, I don't really get into the metaphysical disputes. I get into more linguistic and conceptual disputes, that sort of thing. So I know that was like 30 minutes ago, but I don't really think that there's anything like I understand that the like Mackey has an argument from queerness. I never found those arguments super persuasive myself. Okay, Meredith says, hopefully I made that clear. I haven't heard anyone point out before. Yeah, so that's already in the literature. So you have the argument from queerness, which basically says, yeah, if realists are right about these objective moral facts and they're metaphysically, Mackey uses the term queer, they're weird. There's something strange about them. I don't like fleshing that out and making it into a robust argument. I think is a bit harder to do. All right, similar question to how we come to know about abstract objects under Platonism. Yeah, okay. So, although that was a while ago, so I don't know how relevant that is. All right, cool analogy. I'm Portuguese myself, not from Brazil, from Portugal, similar languages. Similar language, it's supposed to be the same language. I should say, so we watch shows in Brazilian Portuguese, and I'm getting better at understanding them, but I have watched stuff in Portuguese from Portugal, and I don't understand anything. It sounds very different to me. Okay, let's see. That happened to me too. Oh, I had a few theories that people already published on. Okay, let me get caught up. All right, Goblin Lord says, I did want to let you know I still got to get back to you about free will. Oh yeah, no problem. I'm just kind of mulling over the whole language thing and want to consider it a lot more. That's no problem. Mayana says, interest in academics, video games, animation, TV shows. Animation. Did I say something about animation? Yeah, TV shows. I haven't talked a lot about them. I'm really picky with TV shows. Some of the TV shows I like, people might actually think are stupid. I don't care. So, okay, I'll give an example. I really like the show Lucifer. I thought it was a good show. I watched it all the way through, like the beginning to end. Just thought it was a good show. So Meredith says, if you don't know who James Randi was, you should. Yeah, I should talk a bit about some of the James Randi stuff. Jax would never have guessed a live James Randi appearance was going to be part of the Lance origin story. It was. Mayana says, I have 2 bachelor's degrees also. So we're like weirdly similar in certain ways. You say I took political philosophy, and that got me into political philosophy. So I got a double degree in philosophy and international politics. So a little bit different for me. So the main professor that I wrote most of my papers for as an undergrad was in political philosophy. And actually my writing sample to Tufts was on political philosophy. It was, so that particular professor had us work a lot on Nozick and G.A. Cohen. And I ended up writing my writing sample on G.A. Cohen. So there you go. Radically different from what I ended up doing. I can't. So Goblin says, what would you say is a good method of changing problematic epistemic methods that you think is worthwhile? That I can't address that now. That's too hard of a question. Nitty says, can you give your views on fictionalism and how that stacks with your views? I can. Let me put that down to come back to that. All right. So Sully says, what kind of imperative is the title of the stream? I don't know. It's an imperative. Chase says, a true hero's journey. I don't think so. Jack Berry says 140 win it. It does, however, fully mesh with Lance's personality. Yeah, I'm almost certain it's going to be slower today. So it's hard to do it when people are watching me. Yeah, I don't know what speed that was, but probably wasn't 140. So these days I'm probably hitting 110, 120, something like that. I don't know. Okay, so Meredith says, yeah, I'll have to check out what Mackey's written and things. Yeah, so Mackey is kind of the originator of error theory with his book. I think it's Ethics and Bending Right and Wrong. How do I... Let's see. Yep. So check out Ethics Inventing Right and Wrong. That's like the sort of original book promulgating error theory. And you'll see various iterations or versions. It's hard to extract a clear and specific argument, but the argument from queerness is in there. And it's basically, yeah, realist accounts are weird. The naturalist realist accounts are going to be less weird, but then I think that they just run into triviality and the problems of accounting for moral authority. They might just give it up entirely. And so then they're going to have their own problems. Mariana says, different accent, basically same language. Portuguese is like Spanish sounding, but Brazilian Portuguese sounds much different. If you know Spanish and listen to Portuguese, it's very similar. Yeah, I don't know Spanish, so that doesn't help me. Okay, that gets me caught up. All right. Okay, so when I got to Cornell, I got really interested in. Sorry, I'm going to grab another. I'm just going to finish it off. Why not? Done. Okay, so and that was the last Guinness, so I don't have any more, unfortunately. So if I want to do anything now, I have to go make a drink or do shots or something. I don't know. I'm feeling it. Alrighty. So when I got to Cornell, I got really interested in the empirical stuff. And I remember my advisor used to ask people at the end of talks. He would say, hey, did you ask them why they answered the question that way? And that ended up influencing me to some extent. But I also just started having worries. And my worries had to do with how people were interpreting questions about metaethics. So I got really into the empirical literature on metaethics. So kind of what happened somewhere around this time, I was really into the Gill stuff, indeterminacy, variability, and I started finding this empirical literature. The big paper for me was Goodwin and Darley, 2008. And I got really into that paper. And so you had all this variation. And then I started to worry about a particular issue, which is, what if people were not interpreting the questions the way that the researchers intended? And the reason that you got these differences in their responses was because of differences in the way that people interpreted the question. The example I've given probably in this channel a million times is if you ask people about a riverbank, right? And if you ask people about a riverbank and, if you ask people about a bank, right? You say, do you like going to the bank? Some people will interpret it as a riverbank. Some people will interpret it as a financial institution. And that variation in how they interpret the question could lead them to give different answers. If people, on average, like going to riverbanks and they don't like going to financial institutions, then you could get this pattern where it's like, hey, some of these people really like going to the bank and some of the people don't like going to the bank. And then you could say, okay, so you have this bimodal distribution. There's people that really like it. There's people that don't like it. But actually, you don't have a bimodal distribution. You just have two clusters of people that interpreted the question differently. So they've resolved the ambiguity in one of two different ways. So what I started doing basically is asking people how they were interpreting questions about metaethics. And what I found is they are not interpreting the way researchers intend. So I have a paper on this with my colleague, David Moss, called Misunderstanding Metaethics. And then I ended up doing my dissertation on this. So what ended up happening after those 8 years, so about 4 or 5 years in, I did my qualifying exams. I was going to create a new metaethics scale. Then I found a paper that created a metaethics scale, and I was like, no, I'm ruined. And I had to start shifting gears. In fact, I got so upset, I jumped in my car and I drove. My wife was doing her residency in another state. She was in another state. Don't worry about it. So I left. It was a whole thing. I just left for a week or two. I just left the campus, just drove away. So that was silly and embarrassing. And I had to really reorient my perspective. And that was 2017 or 18, sometime around that time. Then I got all these health issues and a bunch of horrible shit happened. So my mom was diagnosed with leukemia and it sucked. She started taking this medication. She seemed to be doing fine with it for a couple of years. And she got off of it. She did chemotherapy and all that stuff. And she started having these health problems. She got pneumonia a few times. She ended up in the ICU a few times. And you know what? I'll tell you about this because it's strange, but it happened. So, I was living in, where was I living at the time? I was living in West Lafayette, in Indiana. And my mom was living in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, where I grew up. And some friends, they were our neighbors. They had moved away. They live in a different state now. But they gave me a call and they said, you need to go see your mother. Now, I talked to my mom. She was like, yeah, I'm in the ICU. I'll be out in a couple of days. I'm actually getting better. I'm fine. So that's what she told me. No one told me anything horrible was happening. Right. And they were like, you need to go see her. This is what's weird about this. Cause I don't believe in the supernatural superstitious stuff, but I was like, yeah, I need to go see my mom and I need to see her right fucking now. So I looked at plane tickets and it was like, if I wanted to buy a plane ticket for the next day or whatever, it was really like, whatever crazy price that it was. Um, didn't want to do that. But I also didn't want to wait until the next week or whatever. So I rented a car and I drove to Florida like immediately. Just the next day, I was like, I need to see my mom and I need to see her right fucking now. So I got in a car and I drove down there. Um, and so I met with her. We talked. Everything seemed to be okay. Like she was eating, she was talking, she seemed fine. Oh, I'm going to be out of here in a few days. She was in remission from the cancer. And I was there a couple days. And then one day I went in, she wasn't talking, she wasn't responding. She never woke up. And she died about a week later. And it sucked. My mom really was, the person that held the family together. And the whole thing was weird. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't drive down there immediately, because if I wouldn't have got to talk to her in person, see her, what the hell was that? Why did I feel compelled to go see her when there was no indication that she was going to die or lose consciousness a couple days after I got there? So that had a big effect on me. And that was 2019. So 4 years ago. And that was rough. And then, so a couple months before that, there's all these weird things, right? So it was in August. So I think she died like October 2nd or something like that. It was the early October. I don't remember the exact day. I think that's the day. I mean, it's not a day like the exact day that I even want to know the specific day. It's not a good memory. So a couple months before that, I woke up in the middle of the night with the loudest tinnitus you could possibly imagine. It sounded like a police siren in my head. Like just me. I guess that's not a police siren sound, but it was a piercing, loud sound. Here's the thing. That never went away. My life radically changed on that day. And it was a couple months before I went down to see my mom. And it's been 4 years, and that piercing, ringing, horrible, awful sound, it just didn't go away. And it's had a huge impact on me. It's made me terrified of it getting worse. It's been hard to manage. It makes sleeping difficult. It makes focusing difficult. It makes it hard to enjoy anything. I wear headphones all the time. I always have a white noise playing. I have like rain sounds playing right now. And it's tough to manage because it's hard to enjoy life when it's just beep all the time. So I had that shit going on. And then, my mom suddenly dying. But at least I got to see her. So shit was dark. And that was the end of 2019. And then COVID happens. And then I'm in the middle. I'm supposed to be starting my dissertation. So here's the sequences. I get scooped on my dissertation. I don't know what I'm going to do. I get a horrible illness that doesn't seem to be going away. And then my mom dies. And then COVID happens. What the fuck? So yeah, I come out of that. You see pictures of me 2018, 2019. It's just brown. Now it's white. And it turned white in that couple of years. And I had to basically, by that point, I was burnt out. I was depressed. I was sad. I was sick. I was feeling horrible. I was isolated. COVID. I'm in a state where I don't have my friends or my family there. And I have to finish a dissertation. And my 5-year mark was up. I ran out of funding. I don't have any income. So I have no money, no family, no friends. I have just my wife, which she helped me get through all of it. And my dog at the time, who is no longer with us. I should show some pictures of her. She's a cool dog. Was a cool dog. I miss her too. So she got me through the dark times. So that was some dark shit. And it took me 3 years to get through that dissertation after that. I had to come up with a new idea. And that's where I came up with that Schrodinger's categories thing. So that dissertation was the culmination of that whole thing that started in 2012. And I finished like officially in earlier this year, 2023. So 11 years to go from one grad program to another graduate program to finally cross the finish line with that PhD. But I feel it doesn't feel like 11 years. It feels like 50 years. I feel so much older. So I feel so worn down, so beat down by everything. And so towards the end of that, I started this channel. I started, the channel started before I finished. So a few months before I finished, I was waiting. I was like, I'm going to wait until I finish the dissertation. Sorry, I'm getting things. I'm like swimming in my own memories, so it's hard to focus. They keep images and things keep popping up. So I managed to finish, but it was rough. It was a lot of work. I put such an insane amount of work. I don't know how many. There's like 50 data sets. It's like something ridiculous like that. I collected just an absurd amount of data. The final dissertation, if people haven't seen it, it's 1,239 pages. If you add all the supplemental materials, I have like 5 appendices and like 5 or 6 supplemental sections. So I did a comprehensive critique of pretty much every prominent paper in the metaethics psychology literature that's ever been published. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote. It felt, I remember just telling my advisor, I was like, it feels like a hydra where every time I cut off one of these heads and get some work done, there's 2 more heads spring up. And there's a lot in there. It was a lot of work. And yeah, I finished, but I don't know, like people don't always do that with it. People write a 80, 90, 100 page dissertation and they're done, maybe 200 pages, but I wrote just a ridiculous amount. And there's a lot in there. And I got to turn that in papers. I got to try to get them published. But I haven't had a lot of success with, since finishing. I mean, it's only been a few months, but to say that I'm burnt out and I'm exhausted I don't even know, like it's such an understatement for where I'm at psychologically. I was burned out and then I just powered through the burnout and wrote while burned out anyway, which was extremely difficult, but I just like put my whole body and soul to the grindstone and just kept grinding for a couple of years until it was done. So like burnout doesn't, like, no, I burned it. And then the ashes, I burned those. And then I burned the disintegrated ashes of the ashes. So when I started this channel, like the only thing in my brain for months and months and months had been metaethics. And that's all I talked about for the past year. And slowly my brain is returning to, hey, there are other things besides your dissertation topic. And you could think about those. It's okay to think about them again. It's okay to talk about them again. And so after about a year, that's where I'm starting to get with my stupid brain, finally, slowly recovering from where I was at. So that's where we're at today. There's the origin story. Let's go through the comments, see what people say. So Justice says, hey, Lance, have a nice stream. I can't pop by, unfortunately. Well, you did pop by. So too late. Moxie says, G.A. Cohen is cool, by the way. Yeah, my critique was not, it was like indirect. I could pull up the paper sometime and share it with you. It was basically, I don't know. It doesn't matter that much. It was like a really technical, weird thing I was doing in there. Andre says, did you listen to loud music, go to concerts, or exposed to loud environments before that? I did, but not immediately before that, and not enough of them to account for what happened. And I'm not going to get into the diagnosis and the specifics of it. It's very complicated. And so that was not the cause. Mariana Smythe says, I had an intercostal rib injuries, anxiety, now probably gastroparesis to this mess since COVID. Yeah. Mariana says, my mom is tinnitus also. Now all she does is wear headphones. Yeah. So a friend gave me these headphones. They're I think they're the Sony ones. I don't even know the brand. Sony. Yeah. Oh, wait. I'm bad at figuring out what cameras are. Sony. So these are the WMX whatevers. and they're super nice. They're so much nicer. So thank you to my friends for giving me these. These are like the expensive ones, and they are an absolute lifesaver for me. So part of the issue with the tinnitus is really severe hyperacusis. I could barely go, like any sound, like a dog barking near me is physically painful. Someone laughing near me is physically painful. Can't go to movie theaters, can't go to concerts, can't go to comedy clubs. Some restaurants I would have to wear headphones. Lecture halls have to wear headphones. Walking down the street, I have to wear headphones. Cars driving by is too loud. I mean, cars driving by is too loud. What the hell is that? So it sucks. It sucks. And I hope they can do something about it at some point. You said, so Andre says XM4. I think this is XM3. Let me actually, Bluetooth actually lists. Let's pull it up. Let's see what it says. It says WH1000 XM3. So XM3. Yeah, so mine, so you have the XM4. Yeah, so you're mentioning XM4. This is XM3. So it's like, I don't know, the previous generation. I don't know how this thing, I'm assuming it's like iPhones and shit. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. That's how I got to the shit that I got to now. That was an hour? Holy shit. What was I doing? I was like in a trance. Griff says, love the content and appreciate the effort. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Okay, so there, you got an origin story. Okay. What else is there to talk about? Should I just wrap it up there? I don't know. That got weirdly intense for a little bit. Do people have questions? I can answer questions. Why not? Fuck it. Ask me questions. I'll answer questions. Let's do it. Throw questions at me. All right. While we're at it, whatever. I'll just say what the video is about tomorrow because it's coming out tomorrow. So the video tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about with somebody else about peer review, and they criticize peer review. Now, I haven't talked about this much because, mostly I criticize more realism, but I think the peer review system in academia it sucks. I think it's awful. I think it's not effective. I think it doesn't do what it's intended to do. It's not even clear what it's intended to do. But to the extent that we have some sense of what it's intended to do, I don't think it serves the purpose it's intended for. And I have a pretty hardcore view about this. I think we should just totally abandon peer review entirely. Now, here's the thing. What I mean is we should abandon the institutions, networks, and structures in place for the current type of universal pre-publication peer review that is a sort of standard feature of science and the humanities. I'm not in favor of that. What I'm not against is the idea of peers reviewing things. I'm all in favor of that. I think peers should review. So I'm in favor of peer review. I'm in favor of if you put something out there in metaethics, other people that specialize in metaethics, it's good for them to look at that and comment on it and review it. But let me be clear about what I'm talking about. The current way things work in academia is most of your career advancement stems from whether you publish papers, and in particular, it varies by fields, and there's going to be other variations. Some fields, maybe if you patent things, that matters, or if you teach really well, maybe that matters more for some professions than others. But a big aspect that's true of many disciplines in academia is, are you publishing? And most importantly, are you publishing in the fancy, sophisticated, high status journals? Now, what that means is you have to get your paper, you have to submit it to that journal, and they have to approve of that paper. So how this works is, I submit a paper to a journal, and I might have to jump through some hoops. That has to be under the word limit or within the word limit. It can't be too short, can't be too long. You have to hit the Goldilocks zone for what that journal wants. It's got to be on topic or whatever. So when you submit it, it goes to an editor. That editor is going to look over it and decide whether they're going to send it out for review. If they think it sucks or they don't want to send it out for review because it's like, I don't know, let's say I submitted a philosophy paper to a geology journal. They're going to say, hey, you idiot, this is a geology journal. We don't publish philosophy. Send this to a philosophy journal. They're not going to put it out for review. So the editor would look at it and go, what the hell are you doing? You submitted it to the wrong journal. Were you drunk when you submitted this? You had too much Guinness. So if the editor thinks it's not suitable or it's not good or whatever, they will let you know, and your paper's already rejected. That's a desk rejection. You're done with that submission. Now you can appeal, you can argue with the editor. Actually, I think it's totally, so you should totally publish philosophy in the geology journal. You can argue with them, you can make appeals, and maybe that'll work. But for the most part, people just move on. They go to another journal. Now, if it's sent out for review, they'll send it out for reviewers, could be 2 reviewers, might be 3 reviewers. And so they'll try to find people that are suitable. Sometimes the submitter will recommend people. So if I submit a paper on metaethics in like experimental philosophy metaethics, I might say Jeff Goodwin would be a good reviewer. Josh Knobe would be a good reviewer. I might Jen Wright would be a good reviewer. So you might mention people that you think would be a good reviewer. Those are all people that have done work on this. And then maybe they'll send it to them. Maybe they won't. Now, you could recommend your buddies. You could say, send it to my friends, and then they might give you a favorable review, which is kind of messed up, but you can do it. And maybe they don't know the persons or your friends, and then they'll send it to them, and then your friends know, and they'll go, oh, this is the greatest paper of all time. Give this person a Nobel Prize. So people do totally messed up shit like that all the time, which is something I'll get to. But even assuming you don't do that, so they'll send it out to a couple reviewers, and then they'll be like, hey, do you want to review this? And then if the person agrees, so you got 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever. Usually the ones I've seen give you about a month. And it's like, yeah, send back a review. Now, you're not paid for it's very rare. You're typically not paid for the review. You're just doing it voluntary. You're doing voluntary labor, right? You're just doing work for free. Doing work that you spent years and blood, sweat, and tears and got a gray beard over. And you're doing this work for free for an academic publishing company that reaps all the profits. They charge an arm and a leg to the universities to have subscription access to these journals. They charge boatloads of money to people all over the place. Sometimes the journals charge the person publishing the paper. So, my dad is always saying, how much do you get for publishing a paper? And I'm like, get? What are you talking about? How much do you get paid? No, I don't get paid. And some journals will charge you. So you pay to publish. You don't get paid to publish. I don't get paid money to publish papers. That's insane. That never happens. So you don't get paid. You might even have to pay. And then some publishing company. Now, back when they printed shit, maybe it made sense. They don't print shit anymore. This is all online. People could. It's what the hell are they getting all this money for? So some publisher gets all the money, and you do all the work, right? So you get 2 people that don't care that much, and they're not getting paid, and they don't have any formal training in this, and they're just told, review this paper. Like, fuck you, figure it out. And you can get everything from like 3 sentences like, I think the paper sucked. I think the author is stupid. And you shouldn't publish this because the author is stupid. And like, you can get a review that you're not going to get a review like that. But you could get a review that is lazy, dismissive, and flippant. And it's not clear whether the person read the paper. Like, it is the laziest shit you've ever seen. And you could get a 25-page review that's longer than the paper itself, and it's the most comprehensive thing in the universe. And the person looks like they spent 14 hours on it, and they cried, and they had a whole dramatic experience reviewing the paper. So you get everything from like on a 1 to 100 scale, from 100 being the greatest review of all time to 1. You get all of them. You get all of these types of reviews. It's not. There's no consistency. There's no consistency. And when they've done studies on this, and they've asked, like, they send papers out, all kinds of studies on peer review. You send stuff out. Reviewers never agree with each other. They just never agree. You just get it's really inconsistent. It's really variable. Reviewers suck at catching errors. There's been studies where they deliberately insert errors. Reviewers barely catch it. They barely catch it when you say you did an experimental design and then you clearly didn't do an experimental design. I don't even catch that. So reviewers suck at spotting errors. And it's just, the system doesn't work very well. And it's super inconsistent and it's super variable. And it's basically a bunch of hot garbage. And this is the system that we use. And then anything that passes that system, that gets the magical stamp. It's anointed. It is holy. It is sacred. It is true science. It is true philosophy. If you have 2 reviewers happen to agree that a paper is good, even though it's a crapshoot. So, I mean, here's the kind of shit that happens. You know what happens if you get your paper rejected? You just submit it to another journal. You say, fuck you, I don't care. And you submit it to another one. And then if they don't accept it, you know what you do? You say, fuck you. And you submit it to a third one. And you just keep doing that until it gets accepted. That's what a lot of people do. They just work there. So you submit it to the top journal you think you plausibly have a shot at getting in. If they reject it, go to the next one. If they reject it, go to the next one. You just keep doing that until it gets in. And since it's random, half of it, it's like a slot machine. So publishing is like half a slot machine. This system is straight bullshit. It's bullshit. And like, when I've seen people raise these concerns, the reaction from some people in science and academia is, you're right, but there's nothing better. Yeah, you know what's better? Not doing it at all is better. So that's what I think anyway. And I think there's a lot to say about why not doing it at all is better. But never mind that. some of them will just become straight up assholes about it. Again, there's no kid gloves anymore. I'm tired of this shit. Look, academia like is not that great. Like it's not that great. It's a bunch. It's a hyper competitive. There aren't enough jobs available. People aren't compensated well enough in spite of the massive competitiveness of it. It's like super ruthless. It's just all about like publishing in high status. What the hell makes a journal like status? What did the journal do to get the status? Not anything super duper great. It's this goofy showing off of these published papers. And the journals care a lot about novelty. They don't want to publish replications of studies, even though that's, you learn when you're in school, hey, if you run a study, you should replicate it 15 times and make sure it actually works. And there are some fields where those elements are built into it, like, some aspects of physics, probably some other fields, not in my areas like social psychology, and certainly nobody's replicating stuff in philosophy. What would you replicate? But yeah, like the standards are just super low, and people are not good at catching errors. The system just doesn't work very well. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is critiquing the institutionalized peer review system. I mean, it's grafted onto this academic publishing industry. That's this super profitable enterprise that profits largely by, exploiting the goodwill of people that review for free. So that's messed up. And then you know what they do with these papers, right? Once they're published, then they go in some repository. Often they're embargoed. I can't even access my own papers that I've published sometimes in an easy way. Like I have to try to get the paper, and then it's like it's an embargoed for 18 months. Ridiculous. It's stuck behind some paywall. So yeah. And by the way, research, you pay tax money. It goes to some government agency. They send the tax money out to a researcher. The researcher takes that money and uses it to, by the way, go to conferences and then eat nice dinners with your taxpayer money. So that's fucked up, but they do it. And then they, whatever. But let's just say the researchers mostly do good research. So then they do all that nice research. And let's just say we're talking about the most virtuous researcher in the world. And they do wonderful research. And then they publish it. Well, guess what, as a member of the public? You don't get to read it. You could go fuck yourself. You pay tax money for that person to run that study, and now it's behind a paywall. Do you have institutional access to a university? No? Piss off. You don't get to read it. Unless you want to use some illicit method for reading it. What the hell is that? So taxpayers pay money, and then there's people do free reviews so that a publishing company can make all the money, and then it goes out for review, and then some person puts a half-assed effort at, whatever, the paper's good, publish it, whatever. And then another person actually puts effort in. There's no accountability if you do a shitty review. None. The worst that will happen is that editor will go, that person sucks, and they won't ask you to review again. That's it. No one comes down and says, you didn't do your job, asshole. That doesn't happen. You could just be a shitty reviewer. Reviewers are routinely nasty. Go on Twitter, look up a reviewer 2 memes. Reviewers will say, this is the worst article in the universe. This person should be ashamed of this. They're just assholes. Like, people just vent in the review. Why? I have not done that in a review, by the way. And I've seen some diabolically awful papers. And I'm just like, here are the 14 problems, the big problems with this paper, and you shouldn't publish it because that's too many problems, and this paper sucks. But like, I say it as nicely as I can. You have a lot of problems here. I don't just people get nasty in the reviews. The whole system is so stupid. The whole thing is just so fantastically stupid. And when you criticize it, you get people flipping out on you. So people will say, I'm gonna, you're an idiot, and you're against accountability and all this dumb bullshit. I am not against other people reviewing your work that work in your field and are experts. But we do not need this slow, stupid. I mean, also, you know how long this can take? Years, by the way, years to publish papers. So you want to get your work out there. You have to format it just so to this journal's stupid, arbitrary, idiosyncratic specifications. So you have to waste all your time doing that shit. Then you have to waste your time sending it out. And then maybe the editor will get to it in the next few weeks. And then maybe they'll send it out for review. And then maybe people will review it on time or not. And then maybe you'll get all your reviews done in like 3 months. And then maybe you might get a rejection, and then you have to submit it to another journal. Maybe you'll get a revise and resubmit, and you'll have a few weeks to do that or whatever. And then you revise, and then you resubmit, and then it goes out to maybe the same reviewers or maybe different reviewers, and then you wait again. And then if you're lucky, if in a few months you get your paper out there. If not 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. So it's slow as shit. It's super inefficient. It's extremely expensive. All the money gets channeled to a bunch of publishing companies, and it doesn't go to the people actually doing most of the work. And for what? for a shitty system for which there's, by the way, the ironic thing about it is there's not a whole lot of peer-reviewed evidence of the efficacy of peer review. So, but what you'll get is a bunch of people reflexively defending it like it's the status quo. And like if you don't have, they think if you're against the peer review system as it is, that you are saying, I don't think when I want to publish a thing that anyone should check it. Everyone should just take my word for it. That's ridiculous. Of course, I don't think people should just take my word for it if I publish a paper. Of course, people should check it. But you don't need this system for people to check your work. You could put your shit on some online repository, and then anybody can check it. You can put your data on there, you can put your paper on there, you can put all your stuff on there, and anybody that wants can check it. What do we need all this other shit for? What do we need it for? And we could build all the databases and systems and all this stuff to organize and collate and like tag it with like, it's about these topics or whatever. But what do we need these publishers for? What are they doing? And is it worth the time and the cost and the energy and the effort and the lack of demonstrated efficacy? I don't think so. I don't think it is. And so that's another thing. I think that there's all these other things that are problems with it. Like that basically people if something is peer reviewed, people treat it like it's fucking magical. Like, oh, it's been peer reviewed, so it's true. And then if it's not peer reviewed, this is the problem. Now, in a lot of cases, if something hasn't been peer reviewed, it's shit, doesn't count. Why? So people will act like if you write something on a blog, like I have a blog. If I write an awesome essay on my blog, academics don't give a shit because it's not published. It's not peer reviewed. Well, so what if someone does exactly what a peer reviewer does in the comments section? They're like, I wrote the comprehensive thing and they print it out as a PDF and they write a bunch of comments or in a Word document. And they do all the comments and then they read it and then I modify it and I improve it. Let's say 100 people did that. How is that not better than 2 reviewers? What if out of the 100 people, 10 or 15 of the people are experts and colleagues and peers? That's better peer review. That's like super mega ultra peer review. But it didn't go through the official channels, so it doesn't count. It doesn't count. This would be like saying you could only determine whether food is good if you have to submit your food to Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay picks 2 chefs. Like, let's say I wanted to make quiches. And then Gordon Ramsay finds 2 quiche specialists. And those people eat my quiche. And if both people like it, then my quiche is approved as good. That's the only way to have quiche officially approved as good. I can't take some quiches, give them to 100 people, including professional food critics, have them eat it and go, yeah, this shit's good. That doesn't count. It has to go through Gordon Ramsay and it has to go off to the chefs. And if you don't do that, screw you. Your quiche doesn't count as genuinely good. It's only officially good if you do this stupid thing that we make you jump through these administrative hoops. You have to do it that way. That is how people treat science. If it goes through peer review, it's legit. If it doesn't, it's not. And then that makes people treat anything that doesn't cross the finish line as crap or doesn't count. And anything that does cross the finish line is like magically true. And the reality is it's blurry. And even if stuff that crosses the peer review line on average is better than stuff that doesn't, that's plausible, right? It's plausible that peer reviewed work on average is better than work that isn't peer reviewed. Think about the overlap between the two. Like, it's not like here's all the peer reviewed stuff, here's all the non-peer reviewed stuff. And then there's a big gap in the middle. So all the non-peer reviewed stuff is just dog shit. And then all the stuff that's peer reviewed is magical, perfect, verified truth. No, it's like they're like boop. It's like they're like so overlapped that you can barely tell the difference between the confidence intervals. It's not that much of an improvement. And if it is, where's your peer-reviewed evidence that it is? All the people that love peer review so much. So what I'm talking about is basically this norm of universal pre-publication peer review. That being a sort of institutional norm in academia. I'm against that. And I'm against the system in place for how that peer review is done. I am not against peer review. I am against academic institutionalized pre-publication universal peer review as a sort of mandate on whether work is legitimate or not. And also, that peer review is bad enough for the sciences where I'll tell you some more things, but let me pop into the comments for a bit. Let's see. Oh my God, so many comments. Kenneth Goes says, what are your thoughts on self-legislation of the Kantian variety? Oh my God, we're not getting into Kant right now. I'm on the peer review thing. Do you think we can be categorically bound by laws we give ourselves? No, I don't. Yeah, so I think the categoricity stuff is, to me, it seems unintelligible. I don't know what Kant's. I don't think Kant is saying something meaningful. If there's these like rules that are somehow binding on us, a lot of that stuff strikes me as really conceptually very, very dubious. So I think it's probably false or nonsensical. Patrick says, how was your beer? It was good. You could see I got nothing in here. It's just whatever foamy stuff is in the bottom. I really want another one now. I feel like I'm on a roll today. So Griff says, favorite fast food. So I really like a local place called Cookout. I love Cookout. There's a place that has, it has really good cheese curds. It's called Freddy's, I think. Yeah, I like that place. So Freddy's I really like. No one's heard of these, right? Okay, I like Taco Bell. I don't care if you get mad about it. Taco Bell is good. I really like the 7-layer burrito that they used to do. So Taco Bell. Trying to think what else, what other good fast food there is. I like fast food. So I like fancy food. I like fast food. I like everything in between. So my favorite food is Japanese food, and then Mexican, and then what? I don't know. I should tell you all about Brazilian food sometime. So I'm going to be going to Brazil in a few weeks. In fact, you will be seeing me stream from Brazil. I will be in Rio Grande do Sul. I'm sure I got the accent and said that terribly. But so I'm going to be in Brazil for a few weeks, and that's going to be fun. So you'll be seeing me stream there. I'm going to be doing some of my videos from there. So Brazilian food is absolutely awesome. Brazilians are fantastic with pizza. Cafe Colonial is really good. They do this thing called X. It's like a burger panini. It's a giant burger panini thing. It's amazing. And you can get whatever you want in it. So I'm sure you could do like vegan and vegetarian stuff, and they have lots of good options for that. And then they have all the meat and options you might want for that. And just all kinds of strange fillings you can get in there. It's not just a burger. It's all kinds of stuff. So those are awesome. The bread is better. The milk sucks. So that's one problem I have with Brazil. They don't have good, like I can't get good fresh milk. So I think that the whole dairy industry there is not like the US. What else? Just the pizza is really good. It's really good. And they have really good hot dogs. What else I have that's really good? There's so many things. I don't know. There's lots of stuff there that's good. I like, what are they called? Botecas. So the bar food there is really nice. So they have all kinds of good stuff. Maybe I'll show you some of the food there. I don't know. But I love Brazilian food. My wife will get angry, but it's not my like top of all the foods, because you're still gonna have. Come on, you're gonna tell me sushi, Mexican food. You're not gonna beat those. But there's so many good cuisines. I love Thai food. I like spicy stuff. So yeah, I was talking about fast food, but I wish there was more. So like, okay, the place that I ate the most at when I lived in Ithaca was at Cornell. Was a place called Thai Express. I went there and I got pad see ew, which is like my favorite thing to get there. I would get all the like just extra vegetables. So just fill it with vegetables, and it was just good. It was just packed and just boom, done. So pad see ew is one of my favorite dishes. So love Thai food. What else? I don't know. I'll talk about food more sometime. Oh, did I put that back up there? Yeah. So, but favorite fast food? Yeah, I would say favorite fast food out of like recognizable stuff is gonna be Taco Bell, which I don't know. I'll check the comments down to see if I made people angry or upset. I don't care. Yeah, thanks. Andres says it was lovely to get to know this about you and your life. Moqueca is awesome. There's so much good Brazilian food. You're seriously missing out. A lot of people are going to be familiar when they have it outside of Brazil, at least in the US, is the churrascaria type places where they like carry the food around on like the skewers or swords or whatever. So it's like a big metal thing with a bunch of meat on it. So those are the typical places you see in the US, but they have a whole bunch of other styles and kinds of food besides that in Brazil, and it's really good. All right. Let's see what else. I want to get back to the peer review stuff because I still feel like talking about it. Oh, wow. It's getting late. Give me one moment. All right. Still going through the answers. Or, I mean, the questions, the answers. What am I talking about? My honest mind says, I was irritated in academia too. When I was there, the philosophy chair tried to withhold my PhD because he didn't like the topic. It was a bad topic in hindsight, but not illegal. Well, I mean, I'm not even going to, whatever. I mean, I had my experiences and stuff in grad school, but I got through it fine. So I don't have the horror stories and terrible experiences a lot of people have had. So, I handled it pretty fine. Answers in Atheism says, a question for you. Do you answer emails? Didn't I answer your emails? What are you talking about? Yes, I answer emails. Yeah, so you can email me at lancesbush.com. There. And yeah, I answer emails. I sometimes will miss an email. You could just email me again. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll answer this. And then I click on it and I don't respond right away. And then I forget about it. And then I end up archiving it or thinking I answered. Sometimes I think I answered and I didn't. But yeah, generally I answer emails. So people will ask me random questions like, what do you think about my theory? And I write responses to them. Like I'm not flooded with emails yet. So I still have to, oh my God, am I prompting people to flood me with emails? Anyway, I'll answer emails. Yeah, sure. Oh, right. Moxie C, is it beyond reform? The present peer review system? Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So I would just replace the system with something else. I think that the system that's currently in place has got to go. I think we need to get rid of it. Zeeb says, why aren't you a physicalist? Well, it's going to depend exactly how you're defining physicalism. And I'm going to have concern. Like if someone says, hey, the best fundamental description of what the world is like is the one that's described by physics, that's fine. If that's what you mean by physicalism, then I'm a physicalist. But if you mean like everything, like if you're going to make it something robustly metaphysical out of it, then I'm not going to go in for it. Because I'm not going to say like reality is composed of the stuff described by physics, because I'm not really much of a scientific realist in the first place. So I'm going to take a much more instrumentalist view about theories and models. I think that our theories are like useful models for making predictions, describing things, and getting things done. I'm fine in everyday context with calling those things real. So like I think tables and chairs are real. I'm happy to say atoms are real and electrons are real. But for me, that kind of language doesn't carry the metaphysical import that I think it does for a lot of other people. So when you start getting into like someone wanting you to defend physicalism, what I routinely find is they want me to defend a bunch of metaphysics that I don't endorse. So, I'm not going to accept dualism or idealism or panpsychism or a bunch of that stuff. So in that sense, I'm an empiricist. And I think physics, basically a reductive physicalist account does a better job than I think every other account does of being what I would say a practical, useful, parsimonious, predictive. It's like the best account that we have running compared to all the others. But as far as like adding extra metaphysical oomph to it, that's going too far for me. And I think part of the reason it's going too far is because I don't think it doesn't do anything. It doesn't add any. It's like saying all of that plus it's really true. There's really is the thing that's out there that's out there. To me, that's just metaphysical extravagance, and it's not necessary. Governor seems interesting. It sounds like the current process is just a filter, which does not do a good job of selecting good papers. Do you have thoughts? Yeah. So this is a good point, and you'll see in the discussion that will be posted tomorrow. Yeah, it's good at best. It keeps out the worst stuff, but it's not particularly good at identifying the best stuff. And even like Nobel Prize winners, and that research has been like initially rejected in peer review. So, yeah, it's not very good at finding out which stuff is the best. As far as the question, do you have any thoughts? This is back to peer review. Do you have any thoughts on how to do it more accurately? So, I mean, we have to think about what we want out of these systems. So we need to think, what do we want to get out of the systems? And then start thinking about how we get there. Some of the stuff is that you should be thinking about like, we want it to be faster, right? We don't want it to be slow. We don't want to, gatekeep too much. We want to minimize nepotism. We want to minimize corruption. We want to ensure that the process is transparent. So when people do reviews, the editor looks at them. Like you don't see people's reviews. They're not published alongside the paper. Why? Don't you want to know what the reviewer said? Why isn't that made available? But it's typically not. I mean, there are occasions where it's made available or where the reviewers' names are added alongside the paper or whatever. I've seen that before. It's not super common. So, I mean, the present system lacks transparency, among other things. So improve the transparency. But you start looking at other stuff. Paying people to do reviews doesn't really seem to improve the quality of the reviews. But the present system where, like, if you're an academic and you work in an area, you get a random email from a random journal at some random time saying, hey, do you have time to do this? That's not organized. It's not systematic. So something that's more systematic, that is more functionally incorporated into people's jobs, that would be better. Okay, I'm back. As far as how to improve the peer review system, what we need to really do is figure out what we, I mean, how to improve it. I think it would be a mistake to think, how could we fix the present system? You could ask this question, which is, let's say we had no system in place. What would we do? What would be the best thing to do? Some of these questions are going to be empirical questions I'm not going to know the answers to. So a lot of it is going to be, we're going to have to try things. So probably the best thing to do is to get a bunch of people with different ideas, different thoughts, come up with a bunch of ideas and try some of them. And part of the problem with that is that some of this stuff only works on appropriately large scale, and that might be hard to test. So I think this is a challenging question, because there's going to be stuff where if you test it on a small scale and it doesn't work well, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't work on a large scale. And then there's other stuff that might work well on a large scale, but wouldn't work well. Would work well on a small scale, but wouldn't work well on a large scale. So I don't know how to figure out and address the empirical questions of how to make, because basically it's not like, how do we get peer review to work? It's when people are producing science and other sorts of academic work, how do we ensure the quality of that work? That's what we're trying to do, right? What we want to do is cast as much light on the good stuff and like get rid of the bad stuff as much as we possibly can. And to do that, the present system just does not seem optimized well for that at all. And it's expensive and it's slow and it's time consuming and it's exploitative and it has all these other problems. So why would we have the current system? Now, the problem is it's very hard to critique that system because people will mistake the current way you do things for what the thing is. So imagine, for whatever, like, everybody burns their coffee, right? So you imagine you're in a country where no one knows how to prepare coffee. They always burn it. It's all bad coffee. And then you say, okay, but I'm against burning the coffee. And the people are like, so you're anti-coffee. You think we shouldn't have coffee. No, I think you should prepare the coffee differently. And then let's say the machine that they use to prepare the coffee, it inevitably burns the coffee. Like, the only thing they use to make coffee is flamethrowers. Okay. So they're like, okay, so how do we use the flamethrowers to make the coffee not burn? It's the wrong question. It's stop using a fucking flamethrower. Sorry for all the profanity today. I don't know what my deal is. But stop using a flamethrower, right? Just stop using it. So like the problem is that people make all these assumptions. They get so used to the peer review system as it is that they think the peer review just is peer review as it is. And it's hard for them to think of the idea of your peers reviewing your stuff with it not being in the present system, where you send it to an editor and the editor picks reviewers. What if you had like an upvote system, like Reddit or something? Might that work? I don't know. What if we just had preprint archives and you tagged it with the right topics and then people searched for that stuff? I don't know. I don't know how, if there's ways of like, why aren't we utilizing modern technology to really optimize for the searchability of the stuff, ways of checking the stuff, ways of updating the stuff? I mean, you have so many problems with the present system. And I usually tend to focus on problems and not solutions. That's just what I do. But problems like this, if I submit a paper in social psychology, right? So I have my methods and design and my like survey or whatever I used. Then I get the raw data from running it. And then I write the paper that's reporting the results of the data, right? So you have your methods and like you have your study design. It could be a survey that might be on Qualtrics or some website for hosting a survey, right? So there's some physical thing that participants interacted with. There's all that, whatever I wrote in there, right? Then there's the data I got from those people. Then there's the report I write about them. When you're a reviewer, typically you only see that report. You don't see the methods they used. You don't see the data. You don't examine the raw data. You don't upload the raw data. You're not like running it in R to see if the code works. You don't get their code and their data and run it to see if it works. That almost never happens. No one's checking the data. They could have no data. They could literally just make up numbers. And if you're a reviewer, 99% of the time, you would not know it because you don't have the data. They could just make shit up. So how can we check if people are fabricating data if you literally do not have access to the data? You don't have it. And even if you had it, no one's going to check it. No one's going to take the time. So no one does any of this. No one's checking this. So we have all these scandals with fabricated data, and people literally go into an Excel sheet and just change shit. And then they get papers published and people find out 10 years later. That is happening all the time. Now, is fabrication the biggest problem with like crappy data in psychology? No, it doesn't account for that much of the data. It's a bit of it. But there's all these other problems. People p-hacking the hell out of their data. So basically, you run, I get 100 people. I run an analysis. I want this result, right? I want P under 0.05. It's not. So I go, okay, well, what if I exclude anybody that took more than 10 minutes or less than 3 minutes to fill out the survey? You rerun it. It didn't work. Okay, what if I throw out everybody that's over 35? Or what if I throw out everybody that didn't answer this question this particular way? I analyze it again and again and again. Then I get a significant result. And let's say the result is only people from Idaho or whatever. I ran the study in 2 states and I get a significant result in one state, but not the other. So then, there's a problem with the people in the other state. And then I just report people in Idaho exhibit this effect, right? So the problem is every time you reanalyze the data, you're basically re-upping your chance of a false positive. And so then there was like 10 chances of a false positive instead of 1. And there's a paper on this that shows with simple simulations that typically if you're running with like you would have like you're supposed to have ideally a false positive rate of like 5%. In principle, like in practice, even that's probably not going to work out that way exactly based on a whole bunch of background considerations and blah, blah, blah. But if you're going to reanalyze your data 50 times, you're asymptotically approaching a chance of finding a significant result of 1. Like it's going to be 10%, 30%, 50%, 70%. You're going to find something eventually if you look hard enough and you have enough data and you have enough variables. And that's what people do. They hunt for significance and then they report it. So that's a problem. There's all people don't use proper procedures when gathering data. There's just all kinds of questionable research. That's the term, QRPs, questionable research practices that go on. So, I mean, we're in a situation where, so all of that is going on. And as a reviewer for empirical research, you're not going to have access to usually any of that. You didn't know they analyzed it 10 times if they didn't say. So you have all these problems and the peer review system can't catch those problems. And even if it could, what are you going to do? Have everybody get all the data and rerun the code? Okay, so I'm rerunning it on my computer and I don't have the R packages updated properly and you're not using Groundhog or whatever the thing is for keeping it updated. So it's not running and saying, okay, so now I have to update my R packages it's your old data and I have to use a system to get the version, from 3 months ago. It's a big pain in the ass. No one's going to run your data. I mean, maybe they can. I think people have actually checked when people actually do. And also, a lot of times people don't make the data available. There's one study where I forget what field it was. The researcher, when people submitted papers, it was the editor. It was the editor for the journal, the researcher. The editor just asked people after papers were accepted, I think with minor revisions or whatever. So these are you're going to get it published as long as you follow hey, fix this comma and do this minor thing and fix it up. It could be not that minor, but it's minor enough. So you're on track to get a publication. So what this person did for a whole year, I think. I don't know exactly how all the details work this way, but roughly something like this. What they did for their journal was once things were accepted with minor revisions, they asked the people for the raw data and a bunch of them withdrew their papers. And they speculate maybe they withdrew the paper because they didn't have raw data. They made it up. It's at least some of them maybe. So you can, and no one checks. They just don't check. So this is not a good system. But let's just suppose they all did provide their data. So you're going to send it out to a reviewer and say, what are you going to have them do? Comb through the data? Really? How? So already people might be spending a few hours on these things. So now they got to get your code, run your data, check the results, check to make sure they match the paper. They're not getting paid for any of this. This is free labor. This is ridiculous. And how many people are going to have checking this? And how are we going to ensure that they checked it? We're just going to trust that they did? There's nothing system. It's not like the IRS. There's not like formal procedure. The editor sends it to a person and says review it, and then whatever they do, that's the review. Whatever they do, they could draw a picture. They could send in a video of them doing interpretive dance. That's their review. Whatever they do, that's the review. There is no like checklist of do all these things. Maybe there's some journal. I've never seen it. I reviewed, I don't know, 15, 20 papers now. No one's ever given me a checklist. They've asked me a couple questions before, comment on the novelty of the paper, that kind of thing, which is fine to ask a couple questions. But it's not like I had to go through, did it do this? Did it do this? Did you check this? Affirm that you check this. I don't think I've ever checked data for a paper, ever. Never. And no one does. I never had the data for, I think maybe I've seen data once or twice. I don't know. So this system is crap. It doesn't work very well, and it's not very rigorous to begin with. Like it doesn't even work well on paper, and then you look at it in practice, and it's even worse. And yet people are like they're so convinced this thing is super awesome, and they think if you're against it, what they think a lot of times is that you're saying just let everything go, just let everybody publish wherever they want. There's no checks and balances, no criteria. It's like if I don't know. I don't want to keep giving analogies. Let me get into the comments. Sounds like it's really subjective of what good is. Of course, yes. The assessments from reviewers are completely subjective. It's just subjective. I liked it. I didn't like it. Alex says Taco Bell is stance independently good. If I don't comment on some of your comments, it's just stuff that I don't have time to address now, and I'll have to address another time. Because I know Nitty asked about fictionalism. Some of it is more complicated. Like I'd be like, all right, if I want to address this, it's like Pandora's box, and I'm already at an hour 45. So I'm just not going to get to it. Okay, there's a bunch of random comments that are fun to read, but I don't know that they make sense to comment on. William says, do you think there's a path forward to fixing these issues? Seems insurmountable with gatekeeping in academia and even just broader science education. No, I don't think we can get around them. I think we have to get rid of the system and replace it with something better. Yeah, I didn't even talk about gatekeeping and there's all these other problems. Like here's something I was reading. I'll post it in the chat. So the kinds of stuff that you get, we have data fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, salami publication. So some of the things people will do is they'll get one big data set and they'll publish like 8 papers with it. People do like they'll give authorships as favors to people. There's ghost authors on papers. There's all kinds of shady shit going on. And, I've talked about, I don't know if I mentioned Goodhart's law here, but Goodhart's law is basically this, it's law. It's not like a law of physics, but basically when you use a measure to like capture something, like you try to measure something, the idea is that the problem is that when the measure becomes the target, it ceases to be a good measure of the thing it was supposed to be a measure of in the first place. That's roughly the idea. So the idea might be if you were going to use some sort of test in order to make sure someone's good at a particular complicated task, what people could do is just figure out how to do really good on the test. And then as they game that test, it no longer becomes a good metric of whether they're good at the task. So what happens is you have this target, right? Which is the thing you actually want to know if someone's good at. Then you create a test that's a proxy for, are they good at the thing? Then what people can do is game or figure out how to get a really high score on that test. And then now it's no longer it's not on target for actually showing or correlating with whether they're good at the task itself. The problem is we set up an incentive structure where we encourage, by making it a central feature, it's like the biggest pillar of career advancement, to publish papers in academic journals. So people are competitive, they're desperate, and they do what they can to get papers in top journals, and they start doing all the sketchy shit to do it. And so one of the most foundational problems with the current system is the fact it's not simply that we have peer review or that it's facilitated through this academic, like academic institutions and publishers and all this stuff. one of the big problems is that this is the primary means that we use to assess people for career advancement. And if we just stopped focusing so much on publish papers, that would take the pressure off people. The pressure, so like people might fabricate data for all sorts of reasons, but the more pressure you put on people to do it, it's basically, look, if you had unlimited food everywhere, we had like Star Trek replicators, would you have a bunch of people like stealing food? Probably not. I mean, maybe some people would anyway, but you're not going to get as much. Now, take everyone's food away. Are you going to get more people stealing food? Hell yeah. People are going to start breaking into stores to steal food because they have to, right, to survive. So incentives are a major factor in human behavior. What a revelation. So what we've done is we've created an incentive system where we're going to churn out 1 million people that have PhDs. We're going to make 3 jobs for all 20 of them. Then we're going to tell them you have to compete with one another. And then we're going to say the main way you're going to compete is by getting papers published in these top journals. And if you don't get enough papers published, when you go into the job market, if you don't get a job in a year or two, what are you supposed to do? Well, it's simple. You leave academia. And now you work in the private industry. And then are you coming back? Maybe, but it's very hard to return. So you have high stakes, tiny windows of opportunity. It's rough. It's really, 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 really rough. So we are just setting up this incentive system that is just absolutely toxic. We don't use holistic systems effectively for evaluating what they're contributing to academic work. You know, you could be a great teacher, a great mentor, you could have a YouTube channel, you could blog, you could do all this stuff. But if you're not publishing in top journals, you are garbage from the perspective of career advancement. It's not just a stupid way of evaluating, one is you're super duper narrowing the skill set that you're getting out of your like top people. There's all these creative ways people could share knowledge and spread ideas and do cool research and all this stuff. And you're saying, no, we want it done in this specific way and no other way. The other ways don't count. We're not going to reward you for that. So people do that stuff because they like it, but there's no reward for it. And so we're getting this really narrowing filter for what kinds of things people are doing. And some people turn to doing sketchy stuff. Some people quit. And some people do all the other stuff and they're just miserable all the time. This system sucks. It sucks. It's awful. And you don't get enough credit for the other stuff. Just, you could be good at all those things, right? Mentoring, teaching, blogging, YouTube channel. You could do amazing at all those things. And that doesn't count for much. But if you get a paper published in Nature or something, you're in. Well, why? Why is that a good way to do anything? It's not a good way to spread information. It's not a good way to incentivize people. It's not a good way to evaluate people's quality as researchers. It's stupid and ineffective and lazy, and it's just a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. It's garbage. And it has wrecked people's lives or driven people away in a way that is anathema to making progress in science and the humanities. I think the system isn't just ineffective. I think it's negligent and unethical for us to not be busting our asses to fix it now. And when people talk about this, other people, half the time they get shit on by other people in academia. Your people are busting their ass in the system right now. So if you start tearing it down, they did all this work, and you'll see in the video I talked to tomorrow that the person that I talked to, I feel like it's weird to say who it is and what it is. Like, I feel like it's gonna be a big reveal. So you'll see their work and they talk about some of these things. So these ideas, I'm not inventing these ideas. This is stuff other people have thought about before me. So yeah, it's not a good system. And it's just this soul draining awfulness. And I don't know how people get through it. It's really shit. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's other stuff to talk about. Diana Spine says, never tried Brazilian food. There's a whole bunch of different Brazilian foods. There's a bunch of states, a bunch of different regions, a bunch of different styles of food. And I like pretty much every food from everywhere where I've tried the food. So I love it all. Timothy Cox says, what are your views on phenomenal conservatism? I feel like whatever its theoretical virtues are, it ends up being kind of a confirmation bias enabler for the average Joe who reads about it. that is exactly what I think. So I actually have a blog post specifically talking about that. That's so cool. I don't know if I did a video on it. Let me post the blog post. This is I don't know if I read your name, Timothy Cox. Where is that blog post? I know it's here. Here it is. So you'll see it here. It's called Humor, Agent-Centered Norms, and Motivated Reasoning. And then I have another one on epistemic blank checks. So I've covered this in some of my previous videos. So look up my blog and YouTube stuff on epistemic blank checks. So yeah, basically, I think what you think. So my biggest problem with phenomenal conservatism is not whether it's true or false, but what it could do, even assuming it was true. And what it could do, assuming it's true, is to give you justification for what you're disposed to believe. But that justification is private. It has no or very negligible dialectical force with anybody else. So phenomenal conservatism is roughly, for people that aren't already familiar, the idea that if something seems to be a certain way to you, then in the absence of any defeaters, you're justified in believing it. It's like reasons to not believe it or believe it something to the contrary is true or whatever. Basically, if something seems true to you and you don't have any good reasons to believe it's not true, you're justified in believing it's true. The fact that it seems true is all the justification you need, at least initially. It could be overridden, but you have some initial justification. Seems like a completely modest, conservative, simple, straightforward principle. The problem is not the principle. The problem is, I think, the psychology surrounding the use of this principle. I mean, and also what it could do philosophically. So, okay, so if something seems true to you and you're justified in believing it's true in the absence of defeaters, what does that mean for everybody else? Nothing. Who gives a shit? Who cares if something seems true to you? I don't care if something seems true to you. Why do I care? I want to know what is true. And the fact that it seems true to you, okay, so you're justified. What does that even mean? You're justified as opposed to unjustified. And so, okay, so your belief is justified. Now what? What does that give you? I think the answer is nothing. This is a bunch of nonsense. It's sanctifying your beliefs with justification. This is silly. So I think the whole idea is vacuous from the outset, but to the extent that it's not vacuous, it's dialectically inert. It can't achieve anything in an argument because it's just a matter of private evidence. So if I see Bigfoot in the woods, I'm justified in believing in Bigfoot. But if then I come and tell you I saw Bigfoot in the woods, you're not going to believe me. And you're justified in not believing me. So if I go, but I saw Bigfoot in the woods and I am justified in believing in Bigfoot, you could just respond with, sure, you're justified. I thought we were arguing whether Bigfoot exists. And I go, well, I know Bigfoot exists because I saw Bigfoot. And the other person might, again, reasonably respond, okay, maybe you do. But I'm not going to take your word for it. The fact that you claim that you saw all I have access to is you claiming you saw Bigfoot. You could be lying. You could be pranking me. You could have hallucinated. You could have been tripping balls in the woods for a month. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. So you might be justified, but I don't care. Do you have like a footprints? Do you have fur? Do you have DNA samples? Do you have photos? That is the kind of stuff that moves other people. So at best, humor's thing, it's like you have personal sanctification for your beliefs. Who gives a shit? What a useless thing. Phenomenal conservatism is, in other words, probably just vacuous, but at best, useless. At best. At the best it could do is be useless. So yeah, so I don't care if it's true or false. It's vacuous and useless. So to phenomenal conservatism, what a goofy idea. All right, did I post the blog thing? Anyway, I think I did. Answers in Atheism says instrumentalism weak sauce. No, it's not. So it's all about getting what we want, practical value. Blamtastical, do you think it's okay to have educated guesses about things in the absence of scientific data? Sure, absolutely. All right, lots of comments. Trying to get caught up. Oh, wow, I'm still 30 minutes behind. I saw a couple people mention Dunning-Kruger. I don't know if you know this, but there's some reanalyses or like people have been looking at the data and it looks like the Dunning-Kruger effect is probably not real. I should post something about that or do a video on it. I need to examine it a little more carefully to see if I agree with the critiques and not with that there is. So like there's the, well, also people have misreported it for a long time anyway. Be careful of talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm not sure that the empirical evidence tells quite so clear a story as the common conception of it is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at. So Goblin Lord, to go back to peer review, says, oh, wow, I'm down to 10 people. A lot of people dropped this stream. I feel like your answer is describing improvements to the process. I feel like a better question might be, what are you selecting for? Right. Yeah. What are you trying to achieve? Bunch of people arguing about stuff that I really don't want to get into. Nidhi, I know I didn't answer your question about fictionalism, so let's bring it up in another stream. I'm running out of steam here, so I'm not going to be able to address it, but happy to talk about it. I guess I'll give a quick answer, which is okay, I'll answer the question. So fictionalists basically say they're error theorists that then say, okay, there are no objective moral facts, but let's act like there are. And like, let's keep speaking as if there are. So since I don't buy the error theorists' semantic account in the first place, fictionalism just never becomes an issue. So like, I just think fictionalism is downstream of a view that I reject. And so we don't need fictionalism. We could go around using moral language, speaking in moral terms, and we're not saying something false. We're saying true things. They're just not realist things. So I think fictionalism is, I guess you could say, unnecessary. If I was an error theorist, I might be a fictionalist. I don't have some sort of deep, serious problem with it. But yeah, my view is, since error theorists got the semantics wrong, then fictionalism never becomes a live topic in the first place. That's the short answer. Hey, I actually answered a question fairly quickly. All right, still going through. Lots of people talking to each other. Patrick says, what uses do metaphysical accounts of stuff we see have? Physics as a science is useful, but they don't really state any of it as metaphysics. Yeah, I think the answer is none. We don't really need metaphysics. There's probably a lot of philosophers get pissed off about that. I don't care. Well, I do care, but only because it, like, I think I'm right and they're wrong. So they're welcome to argue with me. Alternative peer review. Universities should publish on their websites. Faculty should review papers. Cooperation between universities is good too. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but I don't know that I think universities should be in charge of all this. What if you want to work outside of academia? So that's going to be one issue. Meredith says, I appreciate the concern about peer review a lot, especially in light of my own experiences within academia. Yeah, it's one thing I want to do is find people that have had horror stories in academia and get them on here to talk to them. And I should talk about my concerns about academia more broadly. I have tons of problems with it. All right, I think I'm mostly caught up. Yep. Okay, I am caught up. I think I'll wrap it up there. I think I've said enough stuff. So I'll be doing more structured stuff. I mean, might be streaming, might be more structured content at some point about the peer review system and my concerns with it. I have a big list here. I didn't even get into my list. I was just going off the cuff, but I'm looking at my list and I have like 40. What do I have on here? Facilitates gatekeeping, facilitates nepotism, facilitates fake authorship, facilitates incentivizes data fabrication, nepotistic, easy to game, facilitates bad writing, which you'll see me talking with my guest tomorrow about, and arbitrarily limits style, overemphasizes limits on, overemphasizes, what does it say? Okay, that's a complicated issue to get into. But do you have you have incentives in place to do some work rather than other work from the very outset before you even write it? And so it limits the type of, basically it limits people's, it undermines the incentive to write work which isn't going to be as readily publishable. And so it narrows what type of work is seen and what type of work is encouraged for people to do. It's expensive. It wastes people's time. We're talking like just an enormous amount of actual worker time, like years and years and years in aggregate of people's time to do this. It's lack of consistency, lack of quality control. It's not good at catching errors. There's a lack of transparency in the system. It leaves too much decision making in the hands of editors. It's supposed to be like where either the editor or the reviewers don't know who the author is. But in practice, it's either not done at all, or it's optional, or people are able to accurately guess who the authors of the papers are anyway. So it lacks that system of anonymity. So then people actually know who the authors are. So there's massive biases in the system. Reviewers often wield undue power to basically say, I want myself cited in here. Let's see. People aren't paid, so the work is exploitative. There are probably better alternatives, which, we've talked about some stuff that people could do. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. It has all these costs and downsides and problems, and very little in the way to show for it. Here's another thing. Peer review hasn't even been around that long. It's not, people weren't peer reviewing that in the modern form like in the early 1900s. Like this is something that arose in the, I don't know, 60, 70 years. Like it's fairly recent, like in living memory of people around today. Like, the famous anecdote is that like Einstein objected to having a paper reviewed. So like this wasn't routine until very, very recently. Now, maybe there's good reasons to think, maybe because there's so many more scientists working now than there were 100 years ago, that we need it to account for that. But what's the argument for that? This became quickly entrenched until it became status quo, to the point where it's like it's seen as necessary, but like it wasn't necessary 100 years ago. And again, maybe people would think, okay, well, the science was way worse 100 years ago. Was it though? So that's a thing to get into. Oh, so we got a comment here. Oh, more comments. Cool. Patrick says, sorry to hear about your ears. I wear headphones 24/7 for other reasons, and the Sonys are good. Anchor does a decent, cheap alternative with slightly deeper cups to avoid ear touching. Ooh, what are those? Can you send me that? Because I have a bunch of, like, I actually have an Anchor charger right there. So I like Anchor consistently. Look up Anchor over ear Bluetooth headphones. Let's see what we got. Is it Soundcore? Whatever. If you could send me information on that, that would be great, because it's always good to have backup headphones. I see these Anchor Life Q35 multimode. That looks nice. Got nice aesthetics. So I'm always looking for other headphones, because these will break at some point and I'll need to get other ones. I do have One Audio's right over there, which I haven't taken out of the box yet. And I get those because they're really big headphones. I like the big ones that are like gigantic. So yeah, send me the info on that if you don't mind. Oop. Meredith Oleander says, facilitates bad writing. Woof, I feel that. Most of the undergrad comp sci material I had was very low quality. Yeah, so part of the problem is everyone is expected to write in the same dry, sterile voice. It makes papers unengaging and uninteresting and like homogenous in the style. It's this really dry, be as technical as possible, make it as inaccessible and dry and boring as possible. And everybody's expected to write the same way, and it sucks. Q45. Oh, okay. You already mentioned Q45. Let me look that up. What's the difference? What does these numbers mean? Q45. Ooh, okay. That's even nicer. It's getting up there in price though. 150. It's got good reviews. Yeah, that looks nice. And it is cheaper than the Sony ones. I'll flag that. Yeah, that looks good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anchor Space? I didn't see that. Oh, yeah. Okay, it is Space. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Soundcore by Anchor Space Q45 adaptive, active noise canceling, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Better battery and comfort. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's 150, so that's expensive. It's got a $20 coupon, so I'd be paying, I can't even do math anymore, 130. Yeah. So I've added it to my wish list, and then we'll just see. But yeah, the ones I got on are good. But I like ones. These ones are a little tight. The same friends gave me another even older pair, which is super cool. And they were like so used that they were just the most magnificently comfortable headphones I'd ever had. And then sadly they broke. I always break these things because when you wear them constantly, you bump into things, you knock into things, and eventually you're just going to break them. But I'm exhausted. I'm going to head out. That was a lot of stuff. Okay, I will catch everybody later.